Hi, this is Dr. Marty Rossman for The Healing Mind, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how stress influences us. Stress is a part of life and it's unavoidable, but too much stress has a lot of taxing and adverse consequences on our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. And a lot of my focus over my 50-year medical career has been on educating people about what stress is about, how to manage it, how to cope with it, how to minimize it, how to use it productively. And so I want to share with you just a few thoughts about that. Stress is actually a physiologic response to a threat. The term was first coined by a medical scientist named Hans Selye when he was a medical student, and he was doing research on mice, laboratory mice, and he would devise a number of ways. I'm not a big fan of laboratory research, but it has produced a lot of very useful and important knowledge for us. But he would stress the mice in various ways: isolation, electric shocks, withholding food, leaving the lights on all the time, different kinds of stress. And then after a while, he would sacrifice the poor little mice and he would dissect them and see what kind of physical changes may have occurred with these highly stressed mice. And he found what he called the stress triad. Three changes that he found in all of the mice that were highly stressed. And one was that their adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, you've heard about, about adrenaline. Adrenaline rushes through your system when we have a fight or flight response, a stress response. And adrenaline kind of supercharges you and charges your big muscles and makes your heart beat faster and makes your blood clot faster, and just makes you more able to do somewhat superhuman things so that you could survive an attack by a predator or something, a direct threat to your life. So their adrenal glands were much, much bigger than normal because they had been firing all the time. The second thing that Selye found was that they had ulcers in their stomachs or in the first part of their intestines. They developed stomach ulcers. And the third thing he found was that their lymph glands, their lymph nodes, and their thymus gland, which is where the hormone that is produced that activates your T cells, your immune response that protects you from infections and bacteria and cancer, were shrunken, were atrophied. So they were immune suppressed, they had stomach ulcers, and they had very enlarged adrenal glands. So Selye began to study this effect in humans, and his definition of stress was any demand for adaptation. So stress can even be good things. So if we use that definition for stress, that any demand for adaptation is going to be stressful, then we can see that you can't live your life without stress. Stress is a part of life. And it's really about how we deal with it, how we cope with it. Some people have better coping skills than others. And whether or not you succumb to stress, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, or behaviorally by toxic coping, drinking too much, eating too much, smoking, using other drugs, has to do with whether your coping mechanisms are sufficient to deal with the amount of stress that you have. So good stress management really is a matter of not only reducing stress, eliminating stress that you don't necessarily need. I'll talk about that later on, because we can easily get in a habit of creating stress that we don't have to have. We want to reduce the stress, and we want to support and increase the coping mechanisms, the resiliency, the ability to let things go, the ability to solve problems, the ability to adapt to new circumstances. Um, we have found in the 70 years since Sallier first published that chronic unmitigated stress has many more effects on the body than he first diagnosed. It has effects on your blood pressure, on your heart, again, on your immune cells, on your brain, on your sleep, on your behaviors, because, again, it's normal to a certain point. It actually makes us stronger and more adaptable as we respond to a new stress, just like exercise. Let's say exercise is a stress on your body, but if you do it in a smart way, in a reasonable way, you stress your muscles more than they've been stressed by lifting weights or walking or running or climbing or lifting or whatever you do, as long as you're not way overdoing it and injuring yourself, the muscle will respond to that stress by growing and becoming stronger. And I think it's a good model for the rest of us. Our minds will do that too. Our emotional resiliency will grow if we learn to deal with stress in ways that help us grow and learn, and not just get overwhelmed and go all cattywampus with it. So there are a lot of studies since Sallier's research on stress. You've heard of the fight or flight response. I've talked a lot about it. Many other people have. The preparation for dealing with a life-threatening challenge. And the problem being that in modern life, this is triggered all the time just simply by the challenges we have, the schedules, the tight schedules, the overwork, the many difficult things on the news, the big, huge challenges that face us in the climate, the ecology, economy, politics, wars, things like this. So they're everything from the small things and the important things in our family, in our work life. We have a lot to deal with, probably much more than any previous generation, because previous generations didn't have this constant 24/7 influx of the bad news on TV, on social media, on your phone. Anytime you want it, you can get all the bad things that are happening everywhere on earth, constantly, with people then conjecturing on what might even be worse and what might happen next and how it could really go haywire. And this is too much for us to deal with. We have to learn some skills to limit that, to find ways to know what we need to know and not just let it stream in, fire hose of bad news all the time. And we also need to learn mental hygiene habits so that our own imaginations are not running away with us and flooding us with fears and worries, especially those that we can't really do anything about. And I do spend a lot of time teaching about that, and I'll let you know about that in just a little while. So up to a certain point, stress is good for us. There's a principle in biology called hormesis. And hormesis is basically the principle that a little bit of stress, again, like lifting a heavier weight, is good for us, because if it doesn't injure us, it makes us stronger. You know, Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there is a truth to that. We want to try to not go near that edge where it'll kill us, but things like cold water showers or swimming in cold lakes or exercise or challenging your brain with puzzles or problems or taking on something that may be a little bigger than you think you can handle. So you stretch yourself and you challenge yourself and you activate your imagination, and you find out that you can do more maybe than you think you can. Those are good for us. But when the stress is too big and it overwhelms our coping mechanisms and our resiliency, that's where we get in trouble. And we get in trouble because it's just hard to feel that anxiety that comes with the stress. And in order to relieve that anxiety, we turn to ways that we may have learned as children, like eating comfort foods. Nothing wrong with that in certain amounts. But if your comfort food is sugar, simple carbohydrates, just eating that all day long, it's going to make you fat. It's going to make you diabetic. It's going to raise your cholesterol and triglyceride levels. It's not going to be good for your health. If your coping mechanism is drinking, moderate drinking, fine. Recreational, social drinking, fine. If your coping mechanism is drinking, so you're drinking alcohol on a regular basis, it's a neurotoxin, it's a liver toxin. Again, if you're smoking cigarettes, if that's your coping mechanism, we know the effects of long-term smoking. Other drugs. So again, it's not wrong to alter your consciousness. It's not wrong to engage in these things in a limited way if it's recreational and if it's once in a while and if you have a handle on it. But if these are your coping mechanisms so that you're doing them every day, again, the only problem with them, it's not a moral issue. The only problem with these things is that they're toxic over time and they cause health issues, relationship issues, and stress issues of their own. So we need to look for other ways to reduce the stress and to increase our sense of self-efficacy, of being able to do something about the stresses that we're dealing with. So what can we do about it? Stress management, in one simple way of thinking about it, comes down to two things. And one is changing the situations that you can change, taking action. It not only makes you feel less helpless, which is a big deal. Feeling helpless is one of the biggest stressors that any organism can face. So if you can find something to do about the situation that's stressing you, that's going to reduce the stress and make you feel better. But many of the things that stress us are things that we can't really do anything directly about. And so those we need to do something internally. We need to find a way to let them go, to grieve them, to pray for them turning out the way we want, to do imagery and visualization and do something called positive worry imagery, which I can teach you to do, where you, instead of constantly going over and over all the things you don't want to have happen, which kind of hypnotizes you and is showing you that mental movie all the time of the outcomes you don't want to have, turning it around, turning it on its head, and learning how to invest your energy and imagine it coming out the way that you want it, which, whether it affects the situation or not, will affect the way that you feel by letting you review the more positive movie in your head. It sounds too simple and it sounds kind of silly, but if you take a little time and let me teach you that method, it's one of the most powerful stress-reducing methods I've learned in my 50 years of studying and teaching people how to reduce and manage stress. So basic stress management, you can change things that are stressing you if you can. You can learn how to accept them, let them go, or grieve them, or learn how to focus your energy to imagine them turning out the way that you want. That's pretty much all you can do, or just leave it alone completely. So, if we keep that stress level and coping levels, if we keep our coping levels higher, some people say, think of your coping ability as a pitcher and the stress as the water. And if the pitcher is, 2/3 or 3/4 full, you've got some room for unexpected events and some other things to happen. You can generally cope at that level. If the pitcher is full to the top, you have no more room for something unexpected or something going wrong that you didn't account for. You have no energy left. If the pitcher is overflowing, you're trying to keep your head above water. So we always want to keep that container, that coping container, big enough to contain the stress and allow us to work with it. It's not going to go away. You're not going to eliminate stress. You need to eliminate the stress that you don't need to have and learn how to more effectively deal with the stress that is inevitable. And there are many tools available for this. I want to invite you. I have spent a lot of time creating tools for this, and probably the instructional tool I'm most proud of and in terms of addressing this issue is called the Worry Solution. It's available in a couple of different forms. I've written a book called The Worry Solution and created a set of guided imagery audios, and I made them to go together to be kind of like a home study course where the book tells you the science and the cases and why it makes sense to do these things. The guided imagery audios lead you through the 9 to 12 exercises that address the specific areas of worry that we're going to, and stress that we're going to reduce. And that's on the website at thehealingmind.org. And now I've created a new online multimedia course where you get the book and the guided imagery audios along with a journal with a timed out plan and video instructions that review the main lessons so that if you're a visual learner, if you learn best from videos and lectures, now you can do that, use the book as a backup. So that has its own website, which is, of course, www.theworrysolution.com. And I invite you to visit either or both of those websites in order to boost your coping abilities, make yourself more resilient, better coping, more resiliency. When you have that pitcher half empty or a quarter empty, guess what? There's room for happiness. There's room for things you enjoy. There's room to enjoy life. There's room to put things in there that nourish your soul and that make life worthwhile. But if that pitcher is full up and overrunning, there's no room for things like that. So please visit theworrysolution.com or thehealingmind.com and check out the resources that I've got there for you so that you can have less stress and more happiness, which is my wish for you. This is Dr. Marty Rossman from The Healing Mind.